In a peaceful village nestled among green valleys and serene rivers, there lived a young boy named Raga. Known for his intelligence, diligence, and ambitious dreams, Raga appeared destined for greatness. Yet beneath this promising exterior lurked a hidden challenge. Raga's mind was constantly clouded by unnecessary thoughts. No matter what he did, his mind would wander into daydreams, past regrets, or worries about an uncertain future. Despite countless attempts by his parents and teachers to help him focus, nothing seemed to work. From an early age, Raga showed extraordinary potential. He excelled at school, impressed his teachers, and earned respect from his peers. But as the years passed, his struggle with controlling his thoughts became increasingly evident. In class, he would often drift away into elaborate fantasies or replay awkward encounters repeatedly in his mind. At home, instead of completing his assignments swiftly, he spent hours lost in anxieties about things that might never even happen. His inability to control his mind began to interfere with his personal relationships, his academic performance, and ultimately his confidence. At first, his teachers assumed he was merely distracted, a boy lost in his imagination. But as time went on, they realized that Raga's tendency to zone out wasn't just a phase, it was a deep-rooted problem. His performance started declining, and his grades reflected the inconsistencies in his focus. Even in subjects where he had natural talent, such as mathematics and literature, his inability to concentrate prevented him from reaching his full potential. Raga's mind was like a restless wind, never settling for long in one place. While his peers completed assignments and absorbed lessons, he found himself entangled in webs of unnecessary thoughts. He would start with a math problem, only to drift into recollections of a past mistake, then spiral into worries about the future. By the time he regained focus, precious minutes had passed, and frustration only deepened his struggle. One day, his teacher, Mrs. Anaya, took him aside after class. "Raga, your intelligence is undeniable, but intelligence without focus is like a ship without direction. Tell me, do you truly want to succeed?" Raga nodded earnestly. "Then you must learn to command your mind, not let it command you," she advised. Determined to improve, Raga experimented with different techniques. He created study schedules, practiced deep breathing before assignments, and even tried rewarding himself for completing small tasks. Yet his mind, like a mischievous trickster, continued to lure him into distractions. Some days were better than others, but the problem remained persistent. Beyond school, his overthinking infiltrated every aspect of his life. Conversations with friends became exhausting as he constantly analyzed their words, wondering if he had said something wrong. He avoided social gatherings, fearing that he would embarrass himself. His passion for storytelling, once a source of joy, became overwhelming, as he would start writing a story only to abandon it halfway through, drowning in self-doubt. Raga found himself second-guessing every word he spoke, fearing that he might have unknowingly offended someone. The thought of socializing became more burdensome than enjoyable, and soon, he withdrew almost entirely. He watched from afar as his friends laughed and bonded, feeling a deep pang of loneliness yet unable to bring himself to rejoin them. Even at home, his mind was never at rest. Simple tasks, like choosing what to wear or deciding what to eat, became overwhelming as he overanalyzed each decision. His mind raced through endless what-ifs, trapping him in an exhausting cycle of self-doubt and hesitation. His creative spark, which once brought him so much happiness, now felt like a source of stress. Whenever he sat down to write, his mind flooded with criticism before he could even finish a sentence. What if this story isn't good enough? What if no one likes it? These thoughts consumed him, causing him to abandon project after project. He started to believe that maybe he was never truly meant to be a writer, that maybe his dreams were nothing more than childish fantasies. It wasn't just his writing that suffered. Raga found it difficult to even enjoy the things he once loved. Music, books, art, all of them became tainted by the fear that he wasn't good enough, that he would never succeed. He began to feel trapped inside his own mind, longing for an escape but unable to find one. It was as if his thoughts had formed an invisible cage around him, keeping him from truly living in the present. Over time, this self-doubt transformed into something even more dangerous: self-loathing. He began to question his worth, wondering if he would ever be able to change. No matter how much he wanted to break free from his overthinking, it always seemed to tighten its grip on him. And the worst part was, he had no idea how to fight back. His father, noticing his struggle, offered advice over dinner one night. "Son, the mind is like a garden. If you don't tend to it carefully, weeds of doubt and distraction will take over. You must plant discipline, nurture focus, and remove distractions before they grow too strong." Inspired, Raga took on a new approach. He started keeping a journal, noting down every time he caught his mind wandering and what had triggered it. He read books on concentration, learning about the habits of successful individuals. Slowly, he began seeing patterns in his thoughts. Certain times of the day, specific environments, or emotions made him more susceptible to distraction. But despite his efforts, progress was slow. The battle within his mind continued, and each failure felt heavier than the last. The more he tried to suppress unnecessary thoughts, the more fiercely they returned. The weight of his inability to control his own mind pressed down on him, making him question whether he was destined to remain a prisoner of his own distractions. As his struggles persisted, his frustration grew. He found himself withdrawing from his friends, embarrassed by his inability to focus. He became known as the boy who had great potential but lacked the discipline to harness it. His teachers advised him to set goals and manage his time better, but none of these strategies addressed the root of the problem: his restless, overactive mind. Raga felt trapped in an endless cycle. Each morning, he vowed to improve, yet by the afternoon, he would once again find himself lost in a whirlwind of overthinking. His thoughts spiraled uncontrollably, from reliving embarrassing past moments to creating scenarios of future failures. It felt as though his mind had a will of its own, pulling him away from reality and into a maze of self-doubt and uncertainty. The gap between his dreams and his reality widened. He imagined himself achieving great things, winning academic competitions, writing books, or making groundbreaking discoveries, but his inability to focus kept him from taking even the first step. His mind was filled with possibilities, yet paralyzed by the inability to act. He often stared at his textbooks, willing himself to concentrate, but his mind refused to obey. His teachers noticed his struggle and sought to help him. One encouraged him to set small, achievable goals. Another suggested he practice mindfulness techniques to calm his restless mind. A third introduced him to productivity techniques such as the Pomodoro method, breaking tasks into small intervals to maintain focus. While these strategies helped momentarily, they were not enough to counter the deep-rooted nature of his wandering thoughts. It seemed that every effort he made to control his mind was met with an even stronger force pulling him back into distraction. As weeks turned into months, Raga's frustration deepened. He began to isolate himself, convinced that he was incapable of change. He envied his classmates, who seemed to focus effortlessly. They moved forward with their lives, while he felt stuck in place, unable to escape the prison of his own mind. One evening, after another day of failed attempts to focus, he sat on his bed, staring at the ceiling. "Is there any way to escape this?" he wondered. His heart ached with the desire to break free, to take control of his thoughts, to finally become the person he knew he could be. But he had no idea where to start. The more he tried to control his thoughts, the more they seemed to rebel against him. It felt like an endless war inside his mind, with no clear victor. Every day, he would wake up with the intention of focusing better, yet by noon, he would catch himself lost in another spiral of overthinking. His thoughts bounced between regret for the past and anxiety about the future, leaving him mentally exhausted before the day had even begun. He felt trapped, as though his own mind had become both a battlefield and a prison, locking him in an unending struggle. He experimented with different methods, attempting to enforce strict discipline over his mind. He set rigid schedules, forcing himself to study at specific hours, only to find his thoughts slipping through the cracks like sand in a clenched fist. He tried physical exercise, hoping that exhausting his body would quiet his mind, but even as he ran through the fields near his home, his mind continued its relentless chatter. He even considered giving up entirely, resigning himself to the belief that perhaps he was simply not meant to focus like others did. His frustration soon turned into hopelessness. "Why am I like this?" he would often ask himself. "Why can't I just concentrate like everyone else?" These thoughts plagued him day and night, turning into a cycle of self-doubt and disappointment. The more he obsessed over his inability to focus, the harder it became to break free from the cycle. The burden of his own mind weighed heavily upon him, and he began to wonder if he would ever find a way out of the storm raging within. At first, he tried to distract himself. He immersed himself in books, hoping that by losing himself in stories, he could escape his own thoughts. But even in the middle of an exciting tale, his mind would wander, thinking about the past, worrying about the future, questioning his every move. He attempted to drown out the noise by listening to music, yet even the lyrics seemed to echo his internal turmoil. No matter what he did, the storm in his mind followed him. Desperate for relief, he turned to new activities, hoping that if he kept himself busy, his thoughts would have no room to take over. He tried painting, but halfway through each piece, his mind would convince him that it wasn't good enough. He attempted learning a new instrument, but as soon as he made a mistake, he spiraled into self-doubt. No matter what he engaged in, his mind always found a way to remind him of his perceived inadequacies. Even when he sought comfort in nature, walking through the lush forests surrounding his village, his thoughts clung to him like shadows. He would watch the river flow, hoping its gentle current would carry away his anxieties, but instead, he found himself analyzing every decision he had ever made. Was he making the right choices? Had he wasted too much time? Would he ever break free from this mental prison? His mind spiraled into endless self-examinations, each question leading to another, until he was no longer aware of the beauty around him. He tried to focus on the vibrant hues of the wildflowers, the rustling leaves whispering in the wind, the birds soaring freely in the sky. Yet, his own mind refused to grant him the same freedom. Every moment of potential peace was drowned in an ocean of regret and fear. The world carried on, untouched by his struggles, yet he felt as though he was sinking deeper into an abyss of self-doubt. Sometimes he wished he could be like the river, moving forward without hesitation, carving his own path without questioning every turn. But he was not the river. He was trapped in his own mind, a prisoner of his relentless self-criticism, unable to embrace the present moment. At night, when the world was silent, his mind grew even louder. The absence of distractions meant he had nothing to shield himself from the barrage of memories, fears, and regrets. Every mistake he had ever made replayed in his mind like an unending theater of failure. Every fear he had buried during the day emerged with renewed strength, whispering doubts and uncertainties into his restless thoughts. He tossed and turned, unable to silence the endless monologue within. No matter how much he tried to focus on his breathing, count sheep, or recite calming phrases, the weight of his thoughts pressed down on him like a heavy blanket, suffocating his ability to find peace. He would close his eyes, desperate for sleep, only to open them minutes later, feeling as though hours had passed. The night stretched on, his exhaustion deepening with every ticking second of the clock. Some nights he would sit up in bed, wrapping his arms around his knees, feeling utterly alone in the vast silence of the world around him. He would look out of his window at the moonlit village, wondering if anyone else felt the same turmoil. Did others lie awake like he did, battling a mind that refused to rest? Or was he the only one trapped in this relentless cycle of self-doubt and overthinking? Sleep became elusive, and exhaustion only made his struggles worse the next day. His body ached, his mind was foggy, and his ability to concentrate weakened further. It felt as though he was trapped in an unbreakable cycle, one where his own mind was both his tormentor and his cage, locking him inside a world of his own worries, with no clear way out. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day, he stood in front of the mirror and stared at his own reflection. "What is wrong with me?" he whispered. His own face, tired and filled with confusion, stared back. It was then that he realized something. He was fighting himself. Every time he tried to force his mind into submission, it rebelled even harder. He was at war with his own thoughts, and as long as he treated them as enemies, he would never win. Determined to find a new approach, Raga decided to observe his thoughts instead of fighting them. He began writing them down in a journal, noting patterns and triggers. He realized that certain environments made his mind more restless, while others helped him stay grounded. He started waking up earlier, sitting in the quiet of the morning, allowing his thoughts to come and go without judgment. The more he observed them, the less power they seemed to have over him. Yet the battle was far from over. There were days when his mind would pull him back into overthinking, tempting him to fall into old habits. But now, he had a strategy. He would remind himself that thoughts were just thoughts, passing clouds in the vast sky of his mind. He did not have to hold on to them. He did not have to let them define him. slowly but surely, he began regaining control. He found moments of clarity, brief but growing longer each day. His frustration turned into curiosity. Instead of fearing his thoughts, he began to explore them with a newfound understanding. And for the first time in his life, he felt a glimmer of hope. His classmates moved forward, their lives appearing smooth and structured, while Raga remained trapped in his chaotic mental world. He began avoiding group activities, reluctant to admit his struggles. Even when his friends invited him to join their study sessions, he declined, fearing he would only slow them down. He became more and more isolated, feeling like he was standing outside a glass wall, watching others succeed while he remained stuck in place. In an attempt to break free from his cycle, he sought guidance from books. He read about self-discipline, mental resilience, and techniques for sharpening focus. He tried meditation, breathing exercises, even writing down his thoughts to make sense of them. Some methods worked temporarily, but none provided the lasting change he desperately sought. His teachers, noticing his struggle, tried different approaches. One encouraged him to take breaks between study sessions. Another suggested he practice visualization techniques to bring clarity to his thoughts. Though well-meaning, these methods felt superficial. None addressed the underlying storm inside his mind. The more strategies he attempted and failed, the more he doubted himself. "Maybe I'm just not meant to succeed," he thought bitterly. His frustration soon turned into anxiety. The thought of upcoming exams sent his heart racing. He developed the habit of procrastination, not because he was lazy, but because starting a task meant facing the overwhelming challenge of maintaining focus. Each time he opened his books, his mind flooded with doubts. What if I don't understand this? What if I fail again? These fears paralyzed him, making even the simplest assignments feel impossible. The more he avoided his studies, the worse the anxiety became. A single chapter would take him hours, not because it was difficult, but because his mind wandered in circles. He would reread the same sentence multiple times, yet absorb nothing. The looming exams felt like an insurmountable wall, and with each passing day, the weight of unfinished work grew heavier. To escape, he found himself resorting to small distractions, adjusting his desk, organizing his stationery, checking the time repeatedly. He convinced himself that he was preparing to study, yet deep down, he knew he was merely delaying the inevitable. Even when he finally managed to start an assignment, his mind drifted to unrelated worries. Was he good enough? Would he ever be able to change? The fear of failure became more crippling than failure itself. The hours slipped away unnoticed, and by the time he realized it, the day was gone, leaving him frustrated and even more anxious about the time he had wasted. Procrastination had become a vicious cycle, one that seemed impossible to break. Yet deep down, he refused to give up entirely. He knew that if he could just find the right method, if he could learn how to silence the noise in his mind, he could finally unlock his true potential. He just needed someone to show him how. At night, Raga often lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wishing he could turn off the endless stream of thoughts that flooded his mind. He replayed past failures, imagined worst-case scenarios, and feared that he would never be able to control his thoughts. The more he tried to force himself to focus, the more elusive concentration became. He read about mental techniques, tried different exercises, but nothing provided lasting relief. His parents, noticing his distress, tried to help. They introduced strict routines, removed distractions, and encouraged him to take breaks. They even sought professional advice, hoping that therapy or structured training could help Raga reclaim control over his mind. Yet, despite their best efforts, the cycles of overthinking and distraction persisted, leaving Raga feeling like he was stuck in an endless loop of frustration and disappointment. The problem wasn't just about school, it extended to every aspect of his life. When he tried to socialize, he found himself overanalyzing conversations, worrying about what others thought of him. When he attempted to pursue hobbies, he lost motivation because his mind wandered too much. Even simple tasks, like reading a book or completing a chore, became monumental struggles. His mind was always elsewhere, preventing him from truly being present in any moment. Raga's greatest tormentor was not an external enemy, but his own mind. And no matter how hard he fought against it, he always seemed to lose. His parents were deeply concerned and tried many strategies to help him. They introduced various routines, arranged private tutors, and even sought advice from mental health professionals. Each approach yielded only temporary relief, and soon, Raga's wandering mind would return stronger and more disruptive than before. His friends tried to help as well, sometimes gently reminding him to focus or distracting him with games. Despite these efforts, Raga continued to feel trapped by the incessant chatter of his own thoughts. As time passed, Raga developed a habit of escaping into his own mind. When faced with challenges, he retreated into fantasies where he imagined himself as a great warrior, an accomplished scholar, or an explorer traveling to distant lands. These vivid dreams were comforting, yet they held him back from facing the real world with confidence. Over time, his mind became his prison rather than his sanctuary. One fateful day, as Raga sat in his classroom taking a crucial exam, disaster struck. He had prepared extensively, spending hours poring over textbooks and revising meticulously. Yet as he stared at the questions, his mind began drifting. First, it was a brief memory from childhood, then worries about his future career, then fantasies of what life could be like if only he were different. Before he realized it, most of his examination time had passed. Panic set in, and his mind froze completely, overwhelmed by anxiety and regret. When the results were announced, Raga discovered he had failed badly, a profound blow that left him devastated and humiliated. That evening, consumed by despair, Raga sat alone in his dimly lit room, tears silently streaming down his cheeks. His grandfather, noticing his distress, approached him quietly, sitting beside him with a gentle presence. "What's troubling you, Raga?" he asked softly. With a heavy heart, Raga opened up. "Grandpa, no matter how hard I try, my mind keeps wandering. I can't control my thoughts, and they're ruining my life." His grandfather, renowned for his wisdom, paused thoughtfully, then smiled warmly. "Come with me, Raga. I want to show you something important." Curious and hopeful, Raga followed his grandfather out to the garden, where a large empty pot stood in the moonlight. His grandfather handed him a cup of muddy water and said, "Pour this water into the pot." Confused but obedient, Raga did as he was instructed. Next, his grandfather handed him a jug filled with clear, fresh water. "Now pour this water into the pot until the muddy water is completely gone," he instructed. Raga poured carefully, and gradually the clean water pushed the muddy water out until the pot was filled with crystal clear, fresh water. Your mind is exactly like this pot, his grandfather explained gently. If you keep filling it with negative, useless thoughts, it becomes polluted. But if you consistently fill it with positive, purposeful thoughts, the negativity will eventually be washed away. Seeing Raga still reflective, his grandfather decided to reinforce the lesson with another profound story. He spoke of a great warrior named Vaya, who despite his impressive strength, struggled with crippling self-doubt before every battle. Vaya would obsess over negative scenarios, imagining humiliation and defeat, until fear completely paralyzed him. One day, an elderly monk noticed Vaya's struggle. The monk handed Vaya a small cup filled halfway with water and instructed him to add a handful of salt. After Vaya tasted it and spat out the bitter liquid, the monk smiled knowingly. "Now follow me," he said, leading Vaya down a winding path toward a vast, pristine lake. When they arrived, the monk handed Vaya another handful of salt. "Now sprinkle this into the lake and take a sip of the water," he instructed. Vaya hesitated, but he did as he was told. This time, the water tasted fresh and clean, no bitterness remaining. The monk then turned to Vaya and said, "The amount of salt is the same, but the difference lies in the size of the container. When your mind is small, even a little negativity can overwhelm you. But when you expand your mind, like the lake, negativity loses its power. The key is to make your mind vast so that no problem, no matter how bitter, can ever control you." "You see," the grandfather said softly to Raga, "the salt symbolizes negative thoughts, and the container represents your mind. If your mind remains small and constrained, even minor negativity can dominate you. However, if you expand and open your mind, negativity loses its power entirely." Empowered by these powerful lessons, Raga decided he must actively cultivate a disciplined and expansive mindset. He began daily practices of meditation and mindfulness, filled his free moments with inspiring readings and meaningful conversations, and committed himself fully to disciplined study and productive activities. He also started training his mind to be present in every moment, learning to redirect wandering thoughts towards meaningful action. With each passing day, Raga witnessed remarkable changes within himself. His focus sharpened, his confidence blossomed, and his anxiety gradually faded into the background. Over the months and years, he evolved into an exceptional student, admired by teachers and peers alike. His success in academics was not just a result of intelligence, but a testament to his ability to control his mind. Ultimately, Raga became a highly respected scientist, his achievements far surpassing his youthful dreams. Whenever people asked him how he overcame his most formidable challenge, Raga would smile gently and reply, "Your mind is like a pot. Fill it relentlessly with positivity, discipline, and meaningful thoughts, and negativity will never find a home." Raga's inspiring journey became legendary, serving as a beacon of hope and guidance for countless others struggling with similar issues. Through his story, he illuminated a universal truth. Mastering one's mind holds the key to unlocking a life filled with limitless potential and enduring success. And now, the lesson of Raga's transformation is yours to carry forward. Each of us faces our own battles with doubt, distraction, and uncertainty, but by nurturing discipline, focus, and positivity, we can all reclaim control over our minds and, in turn, our lives. Take the first step today. Choose clarity over chaos, action over hesitation, and progress over perfection. If you found this story meaningful and want to continue improving your mindset while expanding your English vocabulary in a professional way, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. By engaging with this content, you not only support more inspiring stories but also create an environment where we can learn and grow together. Let's embark on this journey of self-improvement, one lesson, one word, and one breakthrough at a time.